Welcome to Tuts Plus. My name is Jose Mata, and in this course, we'll learn how to build a Ruby product for the long run. The first thing you might ask yourself is, why would I even consider building a product that would not be for the long run? Is there something special that I should know about? Well, definitely. Building software is not just writing code. It takes a lot more into consideration, and I'm here to share my experience on software that I've built in my career, and so here it is. We have a set of objectives that we want to cover. As with any other software, we need to establish some minimum criteria for the product to be successful. Regarding the development itself, the code base needs to be easy to understand. If you're going to work with a team and you think of hiring people along the way, you'll need to make sure that whoever jumps into the code base knows what they're doing and knows what code they're facing. The features need to be very clear, and the challenges need to be correctly identified. There's not a better way than to make the code easy to understand. So we'll make our way through that in the entire course. We'll also need to assert that the code is easy to change. Change is the most constant thing ever in life and also in software development. The Agile movement accepts this idea of change, and so software should be adaptable to that change as well. We'll learn how to make code easier to change, and we'll put this in a practical manner. As with the entire product, we'll need to make sure that it is easy to deploy. What do I mean by that? Well, not just using Capistrano for deploying a Ruby application. That's not what deployment is. Deployment is an entire process of making a product work in a production-like environment. So we'll take some criteria into consideration when building our product, and you'll see why right up next. Another particular point for the long term is that our product should be prone to scale, and we're going to focus on particular points of scalability, namely distribution and deployment. There are some details that I'm not going to mention, such as using the right tools such as memory databases, database replication, and so on. That's an entire different chapter. We're just going to focus on the entire product regarding the code, not infrastructure or anything like that. The final objective we'll take in mind is that the product should be a subject to several communities. Products like Twitter and Facebook, all of those different services, have different communities. They have the end users, of course, who consume the product, the service, and also an entire set of developers that want to extend on the product, create different APIs, different products that are based on our information, our data. So we'll take that into consideration as well. So what should we consider for our product? Well, since we are going to learn how to build a Ruby product well for the long run, we'll need to consider some techniques, such as object-oriented design, so that we can face, for example, Rails upgrades and several other frameworks that we're going to use, several dependencies, but they get constantly changed, and upon that change, we'll need to update some of our code base. Well, we're going to make sure that we need to do as little as possible regarding those upgrades and dependency management. We're also going to consider tests. That is almost a must in Ruby, but we're going to focus on that matter. We're going to build some tests using the Minitest framework. Since the entire course will revolve around a practical example for an application, we're going to consider refactoring techniques along the way. In fact, this is supposed to be as live an example as possible. So we're going to do a normal development workflow, and refactoring will take place in the middle of our sessions. We're also going to focus a lot on documentation. It is an essential part of software development, and we should make sure that at least a README is present and API documentation is also covered. Since we want to tackle different communities, not just end users, but application developers, we want to make sure that code documentation is present. Remember that most likely you will be working with a team and also with yourself in the future and in the past. So it's essential that you store documentation for whatever you were thinking when developing a feature, a method, or a class, and even feature data, information that's valuable at a beginning point in time and will be useful later on. We're also going to take into consideration source control. We're going to use Git with the same workflow as we are going to consider refactoring and tests. We'll be using Git, but you can use whatever source code control tool you are used to, either SVN or Mercurial or even Bazaar. It's up to you. I personally prefer Git because it's really powerful. So let's go through the agenda for the course. What will we be building? Well, first of all, we're going to set up an environment for our project structure. Since we're going to build a little more than complex Ruby product, we'll need to set up a set of preconditions so that we can start our work and prepare the team. Next, we're going to start by building the source. We're going to build the foundation for our product. And for that purpose, we're going to rely on a Rails 4 API application. The communication endpoint for the entire world is going to be an HTTP server that will rely on the power of Ruby on Rails. After we build this API, we are going to build two clients. One that is a CLI application, and this is just an option because we could be doing several different things. I personally think that CLI apps are really powerful and also a great source of knowledge and learning experience. We'll be delving with some constructs and restrictions that command line apps provide, and it will be very fun and actually rewarding. Next, we're going to build a simple web client. We can still use Rails 4, but you could be using, I don't know, Yeoman or Ember, Backbone. It's up to you. That's actually the big point of this course, to allow yourself to build different implementations of web applications. I could build a whole set of lessons just to build an Android application or an iOS application or an Objective-C application for the Mac or something in C# for Windows. It really doesn't matter. For the example, I can build a Sinatra application. It will just rely on the HTTP endpoint that is provided by the Rails API, so it will be a different experience than dealing with Rails again. So let's jump in and get started. In the next lesson, we'll set up the entire environment to get started. See you soon!